Stoicism and the Power of Silence. What if I told you that silence could be more powerful than the loudest voice in the room? In an age where opinions fly faster than we can process them, where social media rewards the fastest reply and the boldest take, silence might feel like surrender. But to the Stoic philosophers, silence was anything but weakness. It was strength. It was wisdom. It was control. Only the wise are silent. A saying goes, not because they have nothing to say, but because they know when to speak, and more importantly, when not to. Stoicism, the ancient school of philosophy championed by figures like Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, and Seneca, teaches us that virtue is found not in dominance or noise, but in restraint. And one of the most underrated expressions of restraint is silence. Think about the last time someone said something that angered you. Did your reaction help? Did it make things better, or just louder? The truth is, we often speak not because we have something meaningful to say, but because we want to win, to respond, to defend ourselves. Stoicism teaches us to pause, to ask, is this in my control? If not, why waste energy responding to it? Epictetus reminds us, it is not things themselves that disturb us, but our opinions about them. When someone insults us, it's not the insult that causes pain, it's our decision to take it personally, to react, to fight back. But what if we chose silence instead? Silence is a mirror. It reflects back the noise of others and forces them to confront themselves. A person who insults you expects a reaction. When none comes, they are left alone with their words and their power fades. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." And sometimes silence is that revenge, not as punishment, but as a refusal to engage in ugliness. There's also a deeper kind of silence, the internal one. Not just quiet lips, but a quiet mind. This is where Stoicism truly shines. It isn't about repressing emotion, but about mastering it. The Stoic seeks stillness amidst chaos, clarity amidst confusion. The wise person doesn't need to shout to be heard because their presence speaks for them. And here's the paradox. In being silent, you often say the most. When you don't rise to every provocation, when you don't post every opinion, when you don't fight every battle, you show what you stand for without having to declare it. You reveal strength without aggression. You model clarity without confrontation. In a world that screams, silence becomes a signal, a sign of maturity, wisdom, and inner peace. So the next time someone provokes you, or the next time the world demands your immediate reaction, remember this. Not every opinion needs your response. Not every insult deserves your attention. Sometimes silence isn't absence, it's presence. It's power. This is what the Stoics knew, and it's what we can learn today. To truly understand the Stoic view of silence, we must begin with its opposite, noise. Noise is not only the chatter of voices around us, it is the constant noise of impulses and unfiltered emotions inside us. To the Stoics, this internal noise is the true obstacle to wisdom, and silence, both outer and inner, is the gateway to virtue. The Stoics did not see silence as mere absence of speech. They saw it as an active and deliberate state, one born of clarity, self-discipline, and moral purpose. When Epictetus spoke of control, he emphasized that our words, just like our actions, must be guided by reason, not emotion. He famously said, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." To the Stoic, silence isn't about being passive. It's about choosing to speak only when it serves truth, justice, or wisdom. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and philosopher, ruled an empire, yet constantly reminded himself of the need to remain inwardly still. In his meditations, he often wrote about the importance of staying calm and unaffected by the chaos of others. Silence, in this context, was a tool of self-regulation, a practice that allowed him to reflect before reacting, to master impulse before it took over. He recognized that speaking out of anger or pride only revealed our weakness, not our strength. Seneca, another great Stoic thinker, warned against the danger of idle talk. In his letters, he wrote, "Speech that's deliberately restrained is more forceful." He believed that unnecessary words dilute meaning, and the more we speak without intention, the more we betray a scattered, untrained mind. For Seneca, the wise person guards their words as they would guard their wealth, spending them only when truly necessary. This understanding of silence is not about withdrawal from the world, nor is it about repressing opinions. Rather, it's about recognizing that not every situation deserves our voice, and not every thought deserves to be spoken aloud. The Stoic filters their speech through the lens of virtue. Is this kind? Is it necessary? Is it aligned with nature and reason? Silence is also a form of preparation. It gives space for self-examination. A Stoic doesn't speak to fill the void. They speak after having sat with their thoughts, tested them, and purified them. In that stillness, their ideas become sharper, their voice more meaningful, and their presence more powerful. Moreover, silence is a tool of resilience. In the face of criticism, misunderstanding, or insult, silence offers us a choice. Do we react and give away our peace, or do we pause, observe, and respond with dignity, or not at all? As Epictetus taught, we don't control what others say or do, but we do control our response. And silence is sometimes the highest form of response. In the Stoic tradition, silence is not the absence of contribution. It is the foundation of meaningful action. It is a demonstration of control in a world dominated by reaction. It is strength cloaked in humility and power expressed through stillness. To be silent in the Stoic sense is to stand firm when others waver, to be calm when others rage, to listen when others clamor to be heard. It is to lead by example, not volume, to act with purpose, not impulse. In a world where noise is constant, the Stoic chooses silence not because they are afraid, but because they are free. In the chaos of daily life, where reactions are often faster than thoughts, silence has become a forgotten virtue. Yet in the philosophy of Stoicism and in the practical art of emotional control, silence is not a weakness. It is a force. It is the pause between stimulus and response, the space where mastery begins. When emotions rise, anger, frustration, anxiety, our first instinct is often to speak, to defend, to attack, to vent. But the Stoics remind us that this reaction is rarely wise. Emotional outbursts might feel relieving in the moment, but they often leave damage in their wake. Broken relationships, unnecessary conflict, and regret. Silence, on the other hand, creates a buffer. It allows emotions to pass through us without spilling into the world. Epictetus once said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." And the first step in controlling that reaction is choosing not to speak. Silence gives us room to assess. Is my anger justified? Is my fear real or imagined? Is my pride being threatened or my principles? In that silent pause, we move from automatic reaction to deliberate response. But silence is not suppression. It's not about bottling up emotions or pretending they don't exist. It's about giving emotions the space to reveal their nature. Like clouds passing through the sky, emotions are temporary. When we speak too soon, we solidify them, make them more real than they are. But when we sit in silence, we watch them shift and dissipate. In emotional conflict, silence can be the most powerful statement. Not silence as a weapon, but silence as a form of inner command. When someone insults you, your silence says, "You do not define me." When chaos swirls around you, your silence says, "I choose calm." This is not passive surrender, it is active strength. Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic emperor, often reminded himself to be like the cliff against which the waves continually break, but it stands firm and tames the fury of the water around it. Silence is that cliff. It holds firm while the emotional storm rages. It gives no unnecessary reaction, no fuel to the fire. It simply endures, calm, still, resolute. In everyday life, silence can be the most disarming response. When an argument escalates, one person's refusal to engage in emotional reactivity often breaks the cycle. The other person, expecting resistance, is met with stillness instead. And in that stillness, clarity enters. Emotions begin to settle. Understanding becomes possible. Silence also provides a moment to remember what truly matters. When we are emotionally charged, our judgment narrows. We lose perspective. But silence reopens that space. It reminds us of our values. It reminds us that not every battle is worth fighting, not every insult is worth answering, not every feeling deserves a voice. Through silence, we reconnect with our higher self, the rational, observing part of us that sees beyond the moment, the part that knows this too will pass. In silence, we protect our energy, we conserve our strength, we rise above the noise. So the next time emotion threatens to overwhelm, try not to speak. Breathe. Pause. Let the silence do the heavy lifting. It will teach you more about yourself than any argument ever could. And in that silence, you will find something unexpected: peace. Because silence, to the Stoic, is not emptiness. It is control. It is wisdom. It is power. In a world where quick replies are celebrated and the loudest voices often dominate the room, the practice of remaining silent, especially in moments of provocation, can seem counterintuitive. But to the Stoics, and to anyone who has mastered the art of emotional intelligence, silence is not a retreat. It is a shield. To be provoked is to be challenged. Whether it's an insult, a passive-aggressive comment, or outright aggression, provocation is designed to drag us into reaction. It thrives on our emotional instability. It wants us to lose composure, to respond with anger, sarcasm, or defense. But silence resists that pull. Silence refuses to enter the arena of emotional chaos. When someone tries to provoke you, what they're often seeking is control. They want to dictate the emotional tone. They want your attention, your energy, your anger, and if you respond on their terms, you've already lost. But silence denies them that power. It shifts the dynamic. Suddenly, the person who came to control the situation finds themselves speaking into a calm void. They have nothing to grab onto, no emotional hook, and it's unsettling. Epictetus, one of the great Stoic teachers, said, "If someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation." In other words, no one can truly provoke us unless we allow them to. Silence is the refusal to give that permission. It is the rejection of mental complicity. It says, "I will not give away my peace just because you've lost yours." This isn't about being passive or weak. Silence isn't a form of surrender. It's a form of strategy. When used intentionally, it communicates strength and restraint. It signals that you are in control of yourself and that you will not be drawn into drama or disorder. It allows you to choose when and whether to respond at all. Consider Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome and a devout Stoic. Surrounded by political intrigue, betrayal, and manipulation, he could have easily been provoked into rash decisions. Instead, he practiced silence, not as an escape, but as a form of discipline. In his meditations, he reminds himself not to be swept away by impulse, but to remain anchored in reason. Silence was one of his tools to achieve that. In daily life, silence can disarm even the most aggressive provocations. When someone yells at you, insults you, or gossips behind your back, they expect a response. When none comes, it unsettles them. They begin to question their approach. They may even reflect on their own behavior. Your silence becomes a mirror, forcing them to confront their own emotional state without interference. Moreover, silence gives you time. It creates a pause, a buffer zone between the provocation and your response. In that pause, you can assess, is this worth my energy? What is really being said here? What does this person need? My reaction or my understanding? Often, the best response is no response at all. There is also dignity in silence. It shows that you do not need to lower yourself to someone else's level to feel powerful. Your worth is not determined by how well you argue or how fast you clap back. Your strength is measured by how well you preserve your peace under fire. So the next time you feel provoked, don't rush to defend your pride. Don't reach for the last word. Don't give away your calm just to prove a point. Instead, try silence. Let it speak for you. Let it guard your peace. Let it remind you that self-control is the highest form of strength. And in that silence, you will not only protect yourself, you will rise above. The world is constantly noisy, not just with sound, but with opinions, judgments, fears, temptations, and distractions. Our devices never stop buzzing. Our minds never stop racing. And yet, the Stoic philosophers believe that true strength and clarity come not from speaking louder or moving faster, but from cultivating a deep and enduring inner silence. What is inner silence? It's not just the absence of noise, but the presence of calm. It's a state where the mind becomes still, undisturbed by the turbulence of external events. For the Stoics, inner silence was not optional. It was essential. It was the foundation for virtue, for wisdom, for emotional resilience. Without inner silence, there is no self-mastery. Without self-mastery, there is no freedom. Epictetus taught that we must focus on what is within our control and accept what is not. This, at its core, is a practice of quieting the mind. When we learn to stop fighting every unwanted thought, every unfair judgment, every external irritation, we begin to discover a quiet place within ourselves that no one can touch. This is inner silence, not a void, but a source of power. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king, ruled an empire and faced endless trials, yet in his meditations we hear a man constantly returning to inner stillness. "Nowhere," he wrote, can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul. Even in the chaos of war, politics, and betrayal, he sought the one place that could not be corrupted, his own inner world. That was where he found peace. That was where he found strength. This kind of silence does not mean withdrawing from life. It means engaging with life without being consumed by it. The Stoic mindset isn't about escaping challenges. It's about meeting them with composure. Inner silence is what allows us to respond rather than react, to see clearly rather than emotionally, to endure pain without being broken by it, to experience joy without clinging to it. Seneca reminded us that many of our sufferings come not from events themselves, but from how we think about them. We are more often frightened than hurt, he said. Inner silence helps us close the gap between perception and reality. It trains the mind to stop dramatizing, stop overthinking, and start observing life with calm detachment. In practice, cultivating inner silence means regularly turning inward. It means taking moments throughout the day to check in with yourself, to breathe, to reflect. It means not reacting immediately to anger or praise or fear. It means creating space between stimulus and response, and in that space finding wisdom. It also means embracing solitude. Not loneliness, but chosen solitude. Time alone becomes time to recalibrate, to silence the noise of the world so we can hear the truth of our own mind. It is in solitude that our thoughts settle, our values clarify, and our purpose sharpens. In a culture that rewards speed and noise, cultivating inner silence is a radical act, but it is also a Stoic act. It is how we remain rooted when the world is shaking. It is how we protect our peace when others lose theirs. It is how we stay true to ourselves when everything around us tries to pull us away. So let the world be loud if it must. Let others chase after everything they think will quiet their fears. You return to your inner silence. There you will find calm. There you will find clarity. And in that stillness, you will remember, nothing outside can touch the peace you build within. We live in a world addicted to noise, not just the literal kind, the traffic, the notifications, the constant background hum of modern life, but also the mental and emotional noise that clutters our inner space. Opinions shouted across platforms, conversations filled with more competition than connection, reactions before reflection. In this world, silence isn't just rare, it's revolutionary. To practice silence in a noisy world is to reclaim your attention. It's a conscious decision to step away from the chaos, not as an act of retreat, but as an act of resistance. Because when everyone is shouting, the one who remains silent stands out, not out of weakness, but out of wisdom. The Stoics understood the power of silence. Epictetus taught that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, to listen more and speak less. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily that not every opinion needed to be voiced, not every insult deserved a reaction, and not every emotion was worthy of expression. Their silence wasn't emptiness. It was presence. It was restraint, discipline, and clarity. In today's world, this wisdom is more important than ever. With our attention pulled in 100 directions, silence offers a sanctuary, a space where we can hear ourselves think, a moment to check in with our values instead of just reacting to the noise around us. It gives us space to observe before engaging, to consider before speaking, and to feel before deciding. Practicing silence doesn't mean abandoning communication. It means becoming more intentional with it. It means recognizing that not everything needs a response, and that some of the most powerful messages are delivered without words at all. Think of the quiet friend who simply sits beside you when you're grieving, or the leader who listens more than they speak, or the individual who chooses not to engage in gossip, choosing presence over pettiness. Silence sharpens awareness. When we're not busy speaking or reacting, we begin to notice more. What's truly being said beneath the surface of conversations, how others are feeling, and even the patterns of our own thoughts. In silence, we become students of the moment, and that awareness gives us power, the power to respond thoughtfully rather than impulsively. It also strengthens our emotional intelligence. When we choose silence over reaction, especially in tense or emotional moments, we're practicing self-control. We're telling ourselves, I don't need to prove anything right now. That choice diffuses conflict, conserves energy, and protects relationships. Silence isn't a wall, it's a filter. But let's be clear, silence isn't always comfortable. It requires courage to sit with discomfort instead of escaping it with chatter. It requires patience to wait before replying. And it requires self-assurance to know that your worth isn't measured by how much you say, but by how much peace you carry. So, how do we practice silence in a world that fears it? Start small. Turn off your notifications for an hour. Begin your morning without words. No music, no news, no scrolling. Create a space in your day where your mind can rest. When someone says something provoking, try not responding right away. Let it settle. Observe what happens. Use silence not as an avoidance, but as an invitation to reflect, to understand, to grow. Silence is not the absence of noise, it's the presence of depth. In a world rushing to speak, silence invites us to listen. In a culture obsessed with being heard, it reminds us of the value in understanding. And in moments of uncertainty, it becomes our greatest strength, not because it shouts, but because it stays steady. So today, choose a little silence. Amid the clamor and the chaos, give yourself that gift. You may be surprised by what you finally hear, not from the world, but from within yourself. In a world that rewards volume over value, saying less can feel countercultural, almost radical. We are taught that to be heard, we must be loud, that influence comes from commanding attention, that leadership, power, and relevance depend on being the most vocal in the room. But what if the true power lies not in saying more, but in saying less? The Stoic philosophers understood this centuries ago. To them, restraint in speech was not silence born of fear or passivity, but wisdom in action. Epictetus warned that only a fool speaks endlessly on matters they barely understand. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that many things are better left unsaid, not because they aren't true, but because they aren't necessary. And Seneca noted that speech should be like gold, precious, rare, and refined. The power of saying less begins with clarity. When you speak less, you listen more, you observe, you consider, and you weigh your words carefully. What you eventually say carries greater weight, not because it's loud, but because it's intentional. In a world overflowing with words, the quiet voice that speaks only when it matters becomes the one people lean in to hear. This doesn't mean we shouldn't express ourselves. On the contrary, it means learning to communicate with purpose, to speak when your words add value, not just noise, to pause before reacting, to ask yourself, is what I'm about to say necessary? Is it kind? Is it true? These questions form the gateway to meaningful communication. There is a quiet strength in saying less during conflict. When emotions flare, the instinct is to defend, explain, or retaliate. But the Stoics remind us, your dignity is not dependent on proving yourself right. Often, the most powerful response is no response, not out of weakness, but out of mastery over your emotions. Saying less also allows you to preserve energy. Every word you speak is an investment of attention, emotion, and time. When you speak less, you conserve that energy for what truly matters. You become less reactive, more reflective, less entangled in drama, more anchored in purpose. Consider the way we perceive great leaders, thinkers, and sages. They are often remembered not for their verbosity, but for their precision. Their words echo not because they filled the air with sound, but because they chose their words with care. Abraham Lincoln, for example, delivered the Gettysburg Address in just over 2 minutes. It has echoed through history ever since. In daily life, saying less cultivates trust. People begin to notice that when you speak, it matters, that your silence isn't absence, it's presence, that you don't speak to fill space, but to honor it. This builds credibility. It creates room for others. It encourages deeper listening and more meaningful dialogue. Saying less is also an exercise in humility. It's an admission that we don't always have to comment, correct, or control. It invites curiosity in place of certainty. Instead of asserting our views at every turn, we create space to learn, and in that space, we grow. In a culture addicted to self-expression, the ability to say less is a form of discipline. It's a practice of restraint that paradoxically expands your influence. You become known not for being the loudest voice, but for being the clearest, calmest, and most grounded. So the next time you feel the urge to speak, pause, listen, reflect. Ask yourself what the moment truly requires. Sometimes your silence will be the most powerful thing in the room. And when you do choose to speak, let your words be few, but full of intention. Because in a noisy world, saying less is not just powerful, it's transformative. Silence is not the absence of voice, it is the voice that speaks without sound, the language that resonates not in the ears but in the soul. It's easy to mistake silence for emptiness, but true silence is never empty. It is full of depth, intention, and meaning. In the philosophy of Stoicism, silence is not only a personal refuge, but also a profound form of wisdom. In a world that moves quickly, that demands constant opinions, reactions, and performances, choosing silence becomes an act of inner strength. It is the calm eye in the storm, the stillness that refuses to be swept away by chaos. And in that stillness, we discover who we really are. Seneca once said, "Speech is the mirror of the mind." But what he left unsaid is just as powerful. Silence is the mirror of the soul. When we sit in silence, not to escape, but to listen, truly listen, we come face to face with our most honest self. We recognize our fears, our hopes, our impulses. We see our anger before it erupts, our pride before it speaks, our desires before they pull us off course. In silence, we are no longer actors performing for the world. We are students learning from it. The Stoic path does not glorify silence for its own sake, but for what it teaches us. It teaches us to resist unnecessary noise, not only around us, but within us. The noise of ego, of fear, of neediness for approval. Silence teaches us presence. It tells us, be here now, observe, understand, choose wisely. In this way, silence becomes a teacher, a guide, a quiet mentor in a world of shouting. And here's the truth. Silence is not passive. It is power under control. It takes strength to hold your tongue when every emotion demands to speak. It takes courage to listen when everyone else is talking. It takes wisdom to pause and reflect rather than react. This is the voice of silence, the inner compass that tells you when to act and when to let go. In your relationship, silence can be compassion. When someone is grieving, silence can comfort more deeply than words ever could. When there's conflict, silence can de-escalate, giving space for empathy and understanding. When others are speaking, your silence says, I value what you're sharing. I don't need to interrupt. I'm fully here with you. In moments of fear or uncertainty, silence offers clarity. It clears the fog. It creates a space between stimulus and response. In that space lies your power, your freedom to choose your next move, not out of panic, but with purpose. So what can we learn from silence? That sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is say nothing at all. That peace often comes not from adding more, but from letting go. That strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it simply remains still. Let this be your reminder. You don't need to match the world's noise to be heard. You don't need to speak constantly to prove your intelligence. You don't need to react to every provocation to show your strength. The voice of silence already speaks for you through your presence, your calm, your restraint. The Stoics knew this truth, and now so do you. So step back, take a breath, embrace the silence, let it sharpen your thoughts, soften your heart, and steady your soul. In a loud world, be the quiet that brings peace. That is your power, that is your voice, that is the sound of silence.